Grab some popcorn and a favorite chair. The love of movies is why we're here. Press play and don't delay. Let Phil be our guide to a cinematic day. Phil at the movies, from the silver screen to his podcast stream. Phil's covering every movie dream. Phil at the movies. Phil at the movies.
And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Phil at the Movies. I'm, of course, your host, Phil Walsh, and you are listening to episode number 185 of this ongoing podcast that is, you guessed it, for the love of movies. In today's episode, talking about a film that I only briefly covered back in 2022, but in the 3 years since, the film has developed quite a following. Of course, I'm referring to The Black Phone, starring Ethan Hawke. This, of course, is an anticipation of the much-hyped sequel, which will be debuting next week, and I'll be covering that on the show. But today, I thought we'd step back in time and talk about the first film, the one that started it all, its impact, and its growing legacy, because I think it's fair to say in nearly 3 years, this take on a horror icon, and yes, I think The Grabber is a modern day horror icon, has definitely grown and maybe reached levels that we haven't seen since the heyday of Michael, Jason, and Freddy. But we'll get all into that in just a little bit. I am delighted to be welcoming back to the show Mr. Jay Skipworth from Film Strip Podcast. Jay, how are you doing, buddy?
Phil, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me on. I'm always excited to talk movies with you, especially when we get into the spooky realm, as it were, a little bit, because we both enjoy that genre. So
Just a little bit, right?
yeah, and you're bringing on a movie that's directed and written by a couple of guys that I happen to like a lot, and I like a lot of their work together, and I like their work separate too, Scott Derrickson and C. Robert Cargill. And so I saw this when it came out, and I think it's fun that you put The Grabber in this lexicon of horror. I have another place for him that we'll talk about, but
right.
but no, I'm excited to be here to talk about this with you, man. Thanks a lot for the invite.
Absolutely. Anything coming up on your show for spooky season?
Oh yeah, we always get down fun for Shocktober, as we've called it for I think since the beginning now, for a number of years, and we have the last several years have I think because we've burned through most of the series we wanted to do at this point, we have gone into doing what we call a grab bag with guests, and so we've lined up some guests for some fun stuff on Shocktober, but I'll tease one of them. It's one that's been on Lindsay's list for a long time. It's a favorite of hers. We're doing the 1980s Monster Squad movie finally, and so we're going to kick that one off, and that'll be fun. But we've got some other stuff planned. We're trying to hit some different things with this Shocktober, but looking forward to doing that. And then we've had some fun recently, delving around in the sewers with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Alligator, and then the cinematic sewers. Is Ron and I reviewed a movie called Angel, which is like some serious sleaze out there, but
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we had a little fun with that while Lindsay was off doing a play, or a musical. So which we found out later, she was like, "Dang it, I wanted to do that one," but that's how it goes. But no, we're having a lot of fun over there, and lining up for some fun stuff here toward the end of the year too. But appreciate you again having me on the show and plugging Film Strip when you can.
Absolutely, buddy. Well, we're going to get into this film because this one is near and dear to my heart, and I know it is in similar regard for you. For those of you who may not have seen the film The Black Phone, let me set the stage for you. It involves a shy but clever boy named Finney who was abducted by a sadistic killer known as the Grabber. He traps Finney in a soundproof basement where screaming is of little use. When a disconnected phone on the wall begins to ring, Finney discovers that he can hear the voices of the killer's previous victims. And as they are trying to help him make his escape, Finney must contend with the maniacal machinations of the Grabber, save himself, and maybe set free the souls of this maniacal killer. This, of course, stars Ethan Hawke as the Grabber. The first time I saw this, actually, let me rewind that. When I saw the trailer for this movie, it must have been in maybe late 2021. It was around that time, or early 2022. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, this is kind of an interesting premise. I know it is based on the short story by author Joe Hill, but I was sort of, kind of unsure because even though I enjoyed Sinister, which is another work by Scott Derrickson, I just wasn't sure what they were going for with this film. The trailer was sort of like, all right, this could be good, or it could be kind of a, Metza sort of thing. But needless to say, after seeing this film for the first time, I was grabbed, so to speak, and it does something which, frankly, a lot of sort of modern horror films tend to plug, if you will. There's sort of been in the last decade or more this rush to make everything kind of elevated horror. And while there are some themes in this film, particularly the broken home with Finney, bottom line, I think with this film, it really is just determined to be a scary, good time. And yes, like you can maybe read into this, some subtext and some between the lines things, but I think why this movie works in a way, it commits to scaring the hell out of you, and that is all because you've got a great villain. And that sort of drives the entire narrative forward instead of some psychoanalytical diatribe or, like I said, some sort of, subtextual, point within a point. This movie, again, if you see that, great, and you think there's other themes to it, more power to you. I think the film's real strength is the fact that it's designed to be an entertaining thrill ride. And that kind of goes through, especially once Finney is aware of these other lost souls, so to speak, and sort of propelling him, all right, I've got to get out of here. How am I going to escape?
Yeah, and I'll say right now, I'm not familiar with the source material on this. I know Joe Hill and have read some of his stuff, and I think it's good. I just don't read that genre much anymore, but I know who he comes from and everything like that. And and if you don't know, I mean, he's one of Stephen King's kids, and he's got his own kind of path, now. Right. So, I think that's fair, but he can't help but not be influenced by that, because how could you not? But moreover, I think what Derrickson and Cargill did with this, and it's been my interpretation of it, is they took the kind of core root of it and said, what if we remove the turtle space alien stuff? And what if we just took it about abducted kids and what that experience is like? And what if one of them had a chance to free the rest of them that were floating? I have no background. This is my interpretation of it. So I may be completely wrong, and they could tell me if I am, but that's how I read it. When I watched this the first time, I was like, oh, it's like the scariest parts of it, which is the kids getting disappeared and nobody believing you. And then there's a lot of other things in here too. Like I think of a movie like Summer of '84, which is a personal favorite of mine, especially to revisit during spooky season, because it plays on the idea that nobody believes the kids. Right. But if you just listen to the kids, which is a core of Stephen King and a lot of horror literature and a lot of horror movies, is nobody buys the kids. And if they did, life would be different maybe. Right. And I think that's a fear every kid has, right? It's that you cry wolf and everybody's like, you're just being, especially this kid. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think Cargill in particular, and Derrickson's good at directing these, but Cargill's good at writing characters that you want to root for, but you also see why they're in the situations that they're in, because they're flawed. They're real people. Right. That's probably the best part of Sinister, is that he wrote about a true crime novelist who had a one-hit wonder. and was desperately trying to have another one, and what lengths he would go to have that, and then what it cost him. Spoiler alert, which is an incredible. I mean, I love that movie to death, and always have, and I even like the sequel. I know a lot of people didn't dig it, but I thought it was fun, for what it was. But this one, I don't know. I felt like I just slipped into a warm place that I'm familiar with when it comes to these two guys and how they create movies, and they create good aura, like Derrickson's so good at creating aura. And I would tell people, if you want to hear me defend it, go on the Two Girls One Crip show where we're talking about the Hellraiser movies. The fifth Hellraiser movie, Inferno, has no business being as good as it is, except for the fact that Scott Derrickson co-wrote it and directed it. And it's mostly just a direct to video hold on to the rights movie, but like I say, it's better than it deserves to be,
right?
Because he knows how to create a lot of atmosphere, even if it's not entirely working narratively. And in this case, this is a guy who's come off the height of his success, which was Doctor Strange, like the biggest movie he'll ever do, and it was huge. And I love that movie. And in the MCU, it's one of my favorite ones. I know some people don't dig it, but I dug it. And I liked everything about how he mixed that in with all this other stuff. Because it's the hardest thing in the world to do is, how do you get mysticism and a magician in with a Iron Man, and a Hulk? I mean, how do you make that work? But they did. And this movie plays on that same idea too. And I think back to, I grew up in the 80s, but I was born in the late 70s, and I saw all these made for TV movies, and there was all this stuff in school and even at home and in Churchville about like stranger danger, and Cargill and Derrickson grew up in that same time period. And to go back and take people to that, nowadays nobody trusts anybody.
Right.
So you just don't, nobody even looks at you anymore out in public hardly. And I live in the South, which is, one that's a big city. You'd think it's friendly, and it kind of is, but a lot of people just don't make eye contact because we've been conditioned to this now. But back before the internet ruined us all and everything like that, we weren't as aware of these things unless you watch the news or, whatever.
Right.
This is when we became aware of them. And to go back and play with that, to mix in the idea of psychic visions and all the stuff they get into in this movie is really, really neat. And I don't know. Like I said, I haven't read the source material, and I haven't rewatched it a couple times to do this review with you. I'm really tempted to go back and do it now, but I also am like, I don't know that I want to either. I sort of love this movie just to live in its own little place.
Well, let me first clarify something that I said earlier about this film not having sort of a subtext or sort of just being, vacuous, for lack of a better word. What I mean by a lot of horror films will waste the time of the audience with exposition, and in this film, we are thrown right into this world. And I think that's to the movie's credit. It doesn't bother wasting our time, or the story's time for that matter, getting into all the little nitty gritty, what's going on with necessarily Gwen's psychic abilities, or even sort of the larger world context. It's what is happening in this small town with these group of kids. And I like that. I like being thrown right into something. So I just wanted to make that quick point. But no, I think you're on to something, because there's adapting the source material, and then there's just doing your own thing with it. And I have read the short story, and I can say this comfortably: this is a superior version. And the reason for it is, one, it's a short story, so there's not a lot of meat on the bones. This is stretched out to hour and 40 minutes, whatever it is, runtime. A lot more development with the kids and the situation. But the biggest distinction is the character of the grabber. And one, you have Ethan Hawke, who has really created this character. But in the book, he's sort of a slouch. He's very much in the John Wayne Gacy mold, and he wears a clown mask. I can see sort of the design for that when writing the book. I don't think it would have translated well into the movie because you would have people saying, "Oh, this is just a callback to the John Wayne Gacy stuff," or some kind of Joker vibe. Like, I mean, it just it would have been too on the nose. This is sort of making it its own thing.
Yeah, and I agree with you too. When things are adapted, I like it when we adapt them. I don't need it transliterated onto the screen. I think
Right.
medium to medium, there's a good bit of translation, and you can leave a lot of stuff in. I'm on an upcoming episode of Why Wasn't It Better, and talking about a movie that I really love called Presumed Innocent,
Oh yeah.
which is the Harrison Ford legal thriller from the '90s, and it's based on the Scott Turow book. And I've read the book and seen the movie several times, and it's pretty darn close. I mean, there's like direct dialogue lifted, but there are changes in between the things, and it's choices that the screenwriter made, the director made, the actors made, and I think that's when you get material in somebody else's hand, they create it into the character. They create what they want to be. And like you say, that you're talking about the grabber in the book is kind of a Gacy type. It almost sounds like the way that the book version of Norman Bates is versus what Anthony
Yeah.
Perkins
Yeah.
created in Psycho. And I like that though, because anytime you get an actor like Ethan Hawke, who is very much like a Perkins, who can just become things,
Right.
that's what makes him such a good actor. I mean, we throw around the term character actor, and it usually means as the also starring guy, but not necessarily. Some people just disappear into roles. Now, sometimes Ethan Hawke is just playing Ethan Hawke.
Right.
And I want to be clear, but then sometimes he just does things like Sinister's a role where he just disappears into it. And anytime he gets to be a little, I guess say just a little scary, because
Yeah.
he's got an edge to him. I love it.
Oh, he's terrifying in this movie. I mean, what makes it work is you never see Ethan Hawke, and that's something that is a real testament to his
Yeah.
ability as an actor. Even when he has the mask off, and you're just seeing him either
Mhm.
walking around or exposed once Finney breaks it off him. You never see Ethan. You just see the grabber, and I
Right.
love that because number one, you just sort of buy into it, but he's affected a personality and a characterization here where, I mean, he's totally unrecognizable, even though there's very little makeup or prosthetics done outside of what he's wearing on for the mask.
The thing he can't hide is his voice. And
Right.
Ethan Hawke has a distinct way of saying things,
Yeah.
but it works though, and I love that idea that we don't really see him because you don't need to see him because
No.
what Cargill and Derrickson understood is once you unmask the killer, you take it two different places. One, you now have demystified them completely.
Right.
And so I think everyone in our generation sort of goes back to when they took the mask off Darth Vader in Return of the Jedi, and you're like, oh, and that's not what you expect. Me, you're the bald guy. You don't expect that, with the scar on the head. That's not what you look for when you thought of Darth Vader. And I know
Right.
why Lucas did it that way, and that's another day. But when you do that, you do demystify the character a lot,
Sure.
right? You take something away from it, and all the times that they would take Jason's mask off. By the end, it was just puppetry. It was funny, But when they would do it early on, it was like, what's the point? And then they teased doing that with Michael Myers. I think David Gordon Green probably did that more than anybody in his trilogy, but it didn't really matter because it was still the same thing. It doesn't add anything to it. And
Right.
the fact that it is such a part of the character's personality that he never takes it off, this idea of like, yeah, this guy's so twisted that he probably does just keep it on all the time.
Right.
And that's what's scary about it. And then you mix in all of Hawk's personality when he's doing the balloon animals and doing all the
Oh,
the
yeah.
things that attract the children, the magician stuff, right?
Yep.
The sleight of hand, and you realize like that's just something Ethan Hawke knows how to do anyway,
Right.
because he's grown up in entertainment his whole life. This is what you do. I don't know if you know a lot about movie sets that out there listening, but there's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of downtime. So you pick up things. You figure
Yeah.
out how to do a lot of other stuff. And Ethan Hawke's talked about all the things he's learned how to do sitting around movie sets through his life. And to be able to just infuse that in again, it just makes the character eerie, and if you want to keep this sort of sense of dread going, you pepper in the grabber, you make his voice as much a character as he is.
Right.
You know, it's like the early Scream movies. You know, they didn't break the costume out that often, and it was mostly coming after one of those Roger Jackson phone calls, right?
Yeah.
And so, but it kept some mystery to it, you know, and this movie does the same kind of thing. And really though, the wild part is that this movie hangs on Mason themes as Finney, as a kid. And I don't know this dude from nothing. I did not see the latest How to Train Your Dragon. I don't know him from anything, but boy, they hit it out of the park getting this kid. What an unbelievable performance he gives.
That's a perfect segue because a lot of times, and again, I don't mean to, paint a broad brush, but child performances, kid actors, they can go one of two ways. And I'm not going to name a negative example, but they can be cringe and over the top and insufferable, or they can be sort of in that Macaulay Culkin mold of, you can't help but root for the kid and you buy into what's going on. This is one of those situations where if you had the wrong person as Finney, I think the film would not be as effective. And they struck it right with Mason. He just projects an innocence, but also someone who has clearly seen a lot in a very short amount of time, and that's a tribute to his home life. And he's able to project all of those different emotions.
Well, I mean, the thing about him is you want to root for him because you see his life and how difficult it is. He's bullied at school. He's kind of picked on. He's sort of an outsider, but for no other reason than he's just not the popular kid. We all knew that kid. Maybe some of us were that kid, right? And he's had a tough life. He's got a younger sister, and he's obviously trying to look after her because their father's not really a good person to be around at all. And the fact that he lost his mother because she took her own life early on, that kind of a thing is just going to weigh on a boy's mind in a very specific way. And I don't want to get too deep in the psychology here or anything, but it's part of the character. And I love that about it, though, that they give him all of that layer, but it's done through like you get the asides, like you get the line here or there, that kind of,
right.
We don't dwell on it. We don't spend 2 episodes on it. We don't have to have multiple scenes of this. You pick it up very quickly because they're going to get him in that basement pretty quick.
Well, that's the thing. Like a lot of times whenever there's a lot of background or needed exposition, a film will kind of go into overdrive. And this movie doesn't do that. We get just the essential elements to know who this kid is, what's been going on in his home life. But at the same time, it then just sort of puts the pedal to the metal because, and again, I'm not trying to paint with too broad of a brush, but I mean, there's sort of a capturing of how kids are. Like, kids don't necessarily dwell on the fact, even if they've had a broken childhood or tragic events, like they sort of, okay, yep, that's part of me, but they don't fester on it. They just sort of move forward and kind of, I got to go to school, or I've got to, hang out with a friend. Like, life goes on in a way. They're not sort of handcuffed to their trauma or tragic situation. And I think in a lot of ways that makes Finney more relatable because he's not just sitting around wallowing, oh, woe is me all the time. Like he's just a kid at the end of the day. He's just a kid trying to live his life.
Yeah. And I mean, that's what makes him so much fun is that kids are super resilient. And I don't think that, and Stephen King knew that, Joe Hill knows that, and Derrickson and Cargill know that too. And they're going to play on that. I mean, that's the entire sub piece of all of Stranger Things is no matter what, these people persevere, because when you're a kid, everything is a big deal to you, but it's not any bigger deal than your math test. You
Right,
know, like
right.
you like it's that weight of that because you don't. I mean, that's the fun part of it. And I'm not trying to beg on kids here, but you don't have any real responsibilities. You think you do, but you don't. You know, not like you do when you're an adult. But everything weighs the same when you
Yeah.
don't really have that responsibility. So you take everything so seriously. And that's what I like about it is that it does build in this sort of natural resilience. And when you've got a kid who's had some traumatic things happen to him,
Right.
but he's also got a gift, you know, as a part of it, you're sort of seeing like the universe is sort of backing this kid, you know,
Yeah.
when nobody else seems to be. And that fascinates me as much as anything is how they play Finney and the way he operates and the way he works around Gwen and all of this kind of stuff to try and set him up for when he goes through the things he goes through in the basement and he ultimately is going to get the upper hand in this story, how you buy into it and believe that he can do it and you root for him to do it.
Right, and that's another point. They do take their time in the sense we get to see Finney at least for a couple different scenes just going through his day-to-day routine. You sort of have the specter of the grabber in the background, kids going missing, but it's again sort of how things would be in real life. Like it's another headline, it's another day in the newspaper sort of thing. And kind of intercutting that with okay, he's having trouble at school, or they're dealing with their father situation, or he just wants to just be a kid, like it sort of takes us through the motions, if you will. And I think the fact that we don't immediately start within the first 5 minutes of Finney getting kidnapped, but sort of build up to it with that sense of almost a dread, drip, 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 like something is going to happen. There could be danger around every corner.
Right. And I love the interplay between him and Gwen, his sister, Madeline McGraw, who's just a great performer anyway.
Oh, she's fantastic.
She's got a real career in front of her, no doubt. But she's so like sassy and fun, but you can tell like he wants her to be that way because he knows that's how she's going to get through all this trauma too, and their lousy father and
Right.
all the stuff she's going to have to deal with that he's not going to always be around for, so she's tougher than her age would betray at this point.
Right.
She's also like way more mature and probably knows more than he does, or that he thinks she does, which is the funny part. But I love them. I love the way that they play off of each other and things like that. I really do. And again, I'm like with you when you cast kid actors and things, it's iffy. You gotta have the right director that knows how to get the performance out of the kid. I mean, there's probably no more famous version of that than what Stanley Kubrick got out of that kid in The Shining.
Yeah.
And that kid had no idea what movie he was in, but it wasn't the one that he saw. So he talked about years later. He's like, I finally watched it and was like, oh God, I had no idea. So he's like, I thought I was just playing on the floor. But that's a testament to a great director again to get that out of a kid actor, and there are a lot of them that have done
yeah.
it. But I'm crediting everyone involved here because if those things don't work, I'm checking out of this movie quick, like because I've
Right.
seen this. Like that's the thing. There's absolutely nothing original, like totally here.
No.
So I've seen this. So why do I want to care about it? Well, I have to care about it because I buy into who the people are, right? And that's what, for a pun, grabs you about this movie.
Well, no, I mean, right off the bat during the scene when Finney's being bullied by the kids at school, and when Gwen comes to his rescue and like she kicks all sorts of ass.
I know,
right
that's
there
what
in
I
the
love about
playground.
that. She beats them.
When that happened, I said, okay, I am locked into this because right off the bat, like, okay, there's a great brother-sister dynamic here. And I just loved her spunk and grit. It was a perfect way to really introduce her character and the underlying bond between these two. I was just, from that moment, I'm like, okay, let's go.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Totally. I mean, and she's, I don't know. Again, their interplay with each other was great. They obviously got on well and had a good relationship. And I think too, we're out of that stage of like Kubrick in The Shining. We don't have to lie to kids about what they're in anymore.
Right.
Like all the kids in the It movie, like they all knew what they were in. All versions of it, they all knew what they were doing. And I appreciate that here is they give her that beat to where, Big Brother's trying to protect me, but I'm going to whoop the crap out of the guys that are picking on him. That was fun. And that's the kind of humor that Derrickson kind of gets off on. It's definitely
Yeah.
the kind of humor that Cargill gets off on. And I love that. I love that about this, that again, it's a short scene. It's not even the purpose of the movie.
No.
But it lets us know, it lets us believe that when Finney is taken and what Gwen goes through after and everything that happens, in this movie, we buy it because we see these people perform in ways that it's not out of character for them to do what they do later.
Right. And that brings us to the scene when Finney is taken.
Yeah.
And even though it was a big part of the film's marketing, seeing that moment play out, it was utterly terrifying to me. And, I've seen people then and even more so who like to knock the movie, like, oh, well, why would the kid be that stupid? Why would he like? And again, that's the sort of the essence that Derrickson is capturing with this movie. This is supposed to be mid to late 70s. It was a different world. I know people find that hard to believe, but
But it's
there
so
was
real.
there was a time where
Oh.
literally you would not think about somebody getting plucked off the street.
Well, I mean, there are tons of great books about abductions and things that have happened, and the wild theories that people have put behind what happened when in truth it's evil people doing evil things and not some cabal, like the Cult of Thorn somewhere or something like that.
Yeah.
I can get how you would want to believe that. You think about the West Memphis, Arkansas 3. And that whole story.
Yeah.
And what's lost in that is, you get three people that were put in prison for a long time for something that they didn't do. And that's certainly horrible. But what's lost in that are the boys that were killed, and that they were killed by somebody. And that's horrendous, to think about today. But in those days in particular, the whole town turned out looking for them. It was news,
That's right.
And I remember when kids would be abducted and things like that or go missing in the little town I grew up in. I mean, it scared everybody. You'd lock your doors and in towns where you didn't do that, and
Right.
when you see Finney abducted here, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
They're telegraphing it, but you also believe I see how he got lured in, it's like a bait to a fish. Like maybe they know, maybe they don't, but it's just, you just go. And when he's put into that van, oh man, it's just so jarring because it's so quick, and then he wakes up in that just soundproof basement. It's like, wow. This movie doesn't take long to get to its setup, and it's a quick act turn to get to that second act. But boy, is it effective in dropping us right through that hole.
Oh no, there is a tonal shift at that moment because it's sort of out there in the ether at the beginning, but more or less just hinted at. But when we take that plunge and he wakes up in there, it is a whole different ball game, and it, pardon the expression, it takes on a sinister vibe that never really lets up, and I love that because to me those are the best kind of horror movies where you're almost trying to catch your breath and you never can quite get it until the film finally ends and the credits roll, and then you could finally get that much needed inhale and exhale where it's just pure adrenaline from that moment on.
Well, yeah, and I mean, this happens in Sinister with the different 8mm films, and they give you little breaks in between. They do a lot of family drama, which I think is some of the better stuff in the movie, by the way, too, because it makes you,
Agreed.
again, buy the characters and buy the arc that this author goes down, and everything. But in this one, the whole purpose was, and we knew it in the trailer, like this kid's going to wind up in a basement and a phone that's not hooked up starts ringing, and people start talking to him on it. So what is that all about? And you think this is a movie about resilient kids who get abducted by somebody, and then how do they get out of it? So it's The Lovely Bones, but not nearly as cringy, right up to this point. Then it becomes, oh, this is a ghost story.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's a vengeful ghost story, but the ghost can't really, if you believe in ghosts at all, the thing you should believe the most is that they can't really do anything anymore because they're just ghosts.
Right.
But if they can communicate with you, well, that might be just as scary. But what would they be able to tell you that would be useful? I don't know. I find all of this part of it just fascinating when we get to this point.
Well, that's where the movie takes on a whole other lens. And you're exactly right. It becomes not just a serial killer abduction story, it is a ghost story. And that sort of raises the stakes, if you will, and adds a whole other dimension of creepiness to the film because now you're sort of treading that line between what up until this point has been a very straightforward, non-supernatural film. And then when it makes that shift, it works, I think, in part because we've already sort of been introduced to it via Gwen's abilities. And the film doesn't dwell on it a lot at the start, but you get just enough of a hint that there's something going on in the ether here. And so finally when that phone rings for the first time, you're almost perfectly primed for it because it's such a great setup.
Well, and I love the idea too that ghosts are trapped in the place that they die in.
Yes.
We're going to go to that trope, but I love that trope because it makes sense. Like it's the thing that the Beetlejuice musical fixes about the movie. And so why they're hung in the house. If you don't know, in the musical, they fall through their own stairs, kind of like the Money Pit, instead of falling off a bridge in the movie. Which you can explain away if you want to, but I don't. I think it's a plot hole. But I love that. I love that idea that no, you're confined to the place that you died in, or whatever, and something like that, and that each ghost is like progressively more useful, but also more dark.
Yes.
Like you're going to have to get into a darker, nastier place for Finney to get, like, it's like 5 quests he's got to go on here with Bruce, Billy, Griffin, Vance, and Robin. And every time it gets a little darker because it gets closer to people he knows. Robin, he knows.
Right.
The other people he's heard of, right? He's aware of, but like he knew her. So that's why I don't know. I love that whole setup and how each ghost uses that phone to provide him something based on their own failed attempts to escape. And just the idea of that, like I think back to like maze games that I played when I was a kid and even like Indiana Jones movies and stuff. And you see him figuring these things out or you're figuring your way through. And what you realize is that you learn because everybody who tried it before you failed.
Right.
That is dark and a really dark place to go for a movie that stars a kid.
Oh, sure. I mean, again, there's the whole, hypothetical. I mean, what if Finney didn't survive? Like, I mean, is he just going to be another victim in this situation? That was what really sort of knifed in my stomach was like, he's probably going to escape this, but at the same time you had that lingering question. Well, they've all failed up until this point. What makes him so special? And I love that it's really becomes a question of, or a matter of belief, where I think at first, even though there is that resilience in Finney, he doesn't quite believe in himself enough. And it's only kind of through that trial and error where he is able to, sort of get the courage and the strength to act. But I mean, even then, a lot of what happens to him, it really just comes down to his ingenuity, but a lot of it is just he may have been at the right place in the right time.
No, and that's what's wild is that in this story, what we're realizing is that Finney's outsiderness, if you will, and the fact that he's gone through trauma and is a little tougher than the average, 13-year-old boy or whatever, it's going to be his best weapons. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't know it as he's figuring it out. But the fact that he's got the psychic abilities that's allowing him to touch with these kids, it's like every kid that died realizes like, oh, well, we can't do anything about us, but we can do something about this one. And maybe we can get this guy on the way out too. I don't know. I find all of that fun. And that's the thing about this movie is I mean, we're sitting here deconstructing it, as we want to do and stuff. And I think it's fun to do that. But if you just sort of just roll with it and take it, like it's a real gripping watch because you're sitting there and you've got this ticking clock because like he's not going to let him live long. How long does he let these people live? We don't know. It
Right.
just depends on his psychotic whims, right? And that's the cool thing is we don't know anything about the grabber. We get nothing about him, and I love that we don't reveal too much on him.
No, that's, I think, again, the real genius behind this film. You don't need to know more than what we are given. We get just enough with the inclusion of his brother, and that's all the insight we need to know into who this guy is, or really what he is about. Because, as you mentioned earlier, the more you unmask, so to speak, the more you demystify these types of movie monsters. And I'm always in favor of less is more. And I think this
100%.
film gives you just enough to sort of run with theories and speculations. Like even the way his mask will change with the expression sometimes that he'll wear. That again, you can build your own theories of what exactly is that all about? What does that mean?
Hmm.
And it could be 100% right, it could be 100% wrong. It doesn't matter because
Yeah.
he's in many ways he's just a blank slate. You can project your own fears and traumas onto him.
Well, and that's what's so neat about this too is that it's not only Finney, but his sister also has this gift,
Yeah.
right? And so she's using it as ways to try to find him, and it doesn't lead her exactly the right way because your visions are never perfect. I love that when we do visions and they're not exactly right. Like they played with this on several seasons of Angel with the Cordelia character,
Oh,
that
sure.
she would get these visions about what was going down, and that would kind of lead him to the the next adventure or down the path. But they were never entirely like crystal clear as to what was happening.
Right.
It was just enough that you could kind of get in the ring, and then you had to fill in the blanks. And I like that because it makes it more believable. Because you can train yourself to remember your dreams. Supposedly, I've never successfully been able to do this, but just think about the last time you had a vivid dream, and then you try to go put it back together.
You can.
Like I dream. I'm not gonna lie. Recently, I dreamed a killer song. It was like this '80s rock anthem thing I had going. Man, I woke up and I was like, I'm gonna write that down. And the minute I grabbed the phone to tune, I was like, what was the tune again? Where did the kid just group into the ether? It was a great dream, man. It was a killer tune, but but
Need to get Chris-
I'll never be able to resurrect it.
Need to call Christopher Nolan on that one.
That or get Total Recall. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that might be too dangerous. But
No.
but I mean, really, like, but I love this idea of like these visions they're enough to lead you, but it's not going to be complete. It's not that easy, right? Because why would anything be that easy? And if it were, it wouldn't feel fun, right? And that's
Right.
half the fun house of this is that if you beat it too quick, there's no intrigue in it. There's got to be some challenge to it, right?
Well, that's the thing. It adds to the suspense and the drama. Like you think on
Mhm.
the one hand, Gwen is going to figure out where he is, and that's going to lead the police to his whereabouts. And of course, you
Mhm.
want that to happen, but it would be cheating us of all the necessary bends and turns. And again, I love how even though she doesn't necessarily line up to where he was exactly, she plays
Mhm.
her own pivotal role in sort of helping them uncover where he's been hiding the bodies. And
Yeah. And
again,
that
sort of brings the whole house of cards down.
Well, and that's what's wild is that when you learn where he's holding these people in his brother's basement, who's super interested in the grabber's crimes, but has
Yeah.
no idea. I'm like, wow. I mean, I love that. That's kind of the true crime nod of like, I would have never suspected my
Yeah.
own brother, and I love that they're kind of winking to that. But it is true. You may suspect, but you don't know. That's half of your Rear Window is
Yeah.
that whole idea, and it's incredible remake with Shia LaBeouf, Disturbia, which I happen to really like for what it is. But or Summer of '84, any of those kind of movies where you're
Yeah.
pointing the finger at somebody and it's like, it probably can't be them. Though. Could it? Could it? And I don't know. I love that interplay between that there's this Max character, James Ransone, by the way, who I think Scott Derrickson and Cargill will just employ
Yeah,
forever.
no.
And I'm fine with that. I love
No,
Devin
as long as
So-and-so.
they're there, he's gonna be there. Yeah.
He is there, also starring Muse in a lot of ways, but nothing wrong with that. But I do like him though, but because he gets to play something a little different here,
Yeah.
and he doesn't know. And you could kind of buy like, yeah, this is a great way to hide your crimes, right? Your eccentric, weird brother that everybody always thinks is weird anyway, and they leave him alone. Well, nobody's gonna come snooping around there,
Right.
So, but they might eventually see you in your van rolling around. Well, not if it, it ain't nothing in my house. So it's all at Max's place.
Exactly. No, I mean, and that's sort of the movie also tipping its hat to the real life sort of underpinnings that's going through this whole film. I mean, not to go on the John Wayne Gacy thing, but I mean, this was a case of everything was in plain sight, and there's a sort of a historical pattern to these types of individuals operating in more or less broad daylight under everybody's nose, and it's sort of the last thing you'd expect because we all sort of concoct these places. Oh, they were in some far off, haunted house or wherever, way off the beaten path.
Yeah.
And it's right, usually right under the nose of the police or something like it's the neighborhood.
Or you're like the BTK, you're
Yeah.
you're like an upstanding citizen.
Yeah, that no one would suspect.
No one, I mean, people thought you were a jerk because you'd fine them for not cutting their grass or whatever, and you were like the cable repairman.
Yeah.
But like nobody would have. I mean, his daughter wrote an incredible tale of this, and just imagine her life unraveling in front of her when he's finally caught. And you think about the horror of that, and just how scary that is. Because if you look at Dennis Rader, I mean, his mugshot looks kind of sinister and stuff. He'd been up for about 72 hours at that point. That's why he looks like garbage, and stuff like that. But he just looked like a dude. You would have never thought anything about him. And I know, Gacy gets a lot of the clown makeup and stuff. That was one photo.
I know, and it's sort of has been plastered everywhere.
Yeah, that's just become his like persona, but really he was just some dude. He was just a guy. Like Ted Bundy was a good looking dude that was charming, and Dahmer was just that weirdo that worked at the plant. I mean, that's the thing is like you can hide in plain sight.
That's right.
And that's what makes it scary. Is you can hide in plain sight and that these things can happen. And what you wonder, and that's what I love that this movie doesn't ever give us, is what is the grabber doing when he's not grabbing?
Right.
Where is it? I mean, I know he plays games like, he puts the food, he's waiting for him to come up the stairs because, Billy's going to tip off. Finney did that. Like, no, he's waiting on you. This is part of his game, and stuff. And you're like, what is he getting out of this? Because he's not feeding off the fears of the children, and maybe he is psychologically, but like, there's nothing metaphysical happening with that. It's just, that just lets you know, like, just in case you were like remotely on the side of this guy, we're going to let you know, no, he is evil pure.
Yeah.
He is awful. And I don't know. I like that we keep getting all of those things, and you get, oh man, you get all these things in where Finney's got ways to sneak in and out of the house, right? But he keeps getting a step further. Like I said, it's like going on like the old school video game quest. You got to go and pick up the key, and but not in this castle, Mario. Go to the next one. And I love that little, like he almost has to build like little family circus maps to figure out how to get out, right? Like I got a kick out of that.
Oh no, I mean, again, every little bit of information that they give him is just one more key. Again, memorizing the code on the lock combination, or where the dog is supposed to be. Like all of that, just it's subtle. Like you maybe don't pay it much reference when you're first watching it, but I know the number of times I've revisited this film, I'm always gleaming new information, and it's usually kind of those little side quests, if you will, where like you don't think much of it, but oh wait, that actually comes back later on. That leads to this, which then leads to this, and dot 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 dot.
Well, it all gets him to the point, because the whole point of this thing, and what I kind of realized watching it this last time is particularly when Robin is really getting him like, no, stand up for yourself. You can do this.
Right.
We believe in you. Is that everything he's gone through, he has to see how they failed so he won't make the same mistakes.
Right.
That they did. And they need him to do that. So that's how you learn. Particularly as a kid, you learn by doing it wrong. And then you're taught and you do it right. And And yeah, well, I really related to that in a lot of ways because that was my entire Boy Scouting adventure was doing it wrong and then trying to figure out how to do it right. And thankful to the men that were our scoutmasters who had the patience of Job to teach us all those things. But I love how he scales up the whole way
Yeah.
through. And then I really love the idea of like packing the phone with
Oh, with the
dirt
dirt,
to
yeah.
make it heavier.
Give it some
Like,
heft.
what a great idea, right?
Yeah.
And it's awesome. And you've got all that going on while Gwen is giving the cops the right address,
Yeah.
to get there, and that they're in the basement and all this. And I, Max realizing what's going on, and that's when the grabber goes full on berserk mode. That axe
Yeah.
attack,
Oh,
I did not see that coming in this movie. And that third act turn is stark.
every time I watch this film, I am still caught off guard by that. It is just such a shock to the system because
Yeah.
you just don't expect it. I mean, you figure, okay, Max is probably going to be injured at some point, or there's going to be some sort of confrontation. You don't expect it to be that quick. It is one of those rare instances, particularly in modern horror, where a jump scare is used to great effect.
Mhm.
And it works. Whereas, I mean, generally a jump scare is sort of hackneyed at this point, and you really got to be cooking with the right sauce in order to make that dish work. And they deliver a buffet with that scene because it still holds up 3 years later.
It totally does. And I liken it to the moment in The Shining when
Oh
Scatman Crothers comes around the corner and Jack Nicholson just buries that fire axe
yeah,
in his chest. I mean, at that point, you've seen some horrific stuff in that movie, but that is the first time you've seen someone do the horrific thing at
right,
that moment. That's
right.
when we crossed a line at that point, and I again can't prove it, but I feel like these guys wanted to echo that a little bit, here.
Oh, I
And
can
it's
see
just
that.
a
Yeah,
little bit of an homage in that. And I like that though, because it's the thing that gives Finney that last moment to like, okay, I've got to end this now.
right.
This is up to me. I've been given this moment here or whatever, and he's going to do it. And I love that he uses all of the stuff that he's learned along the way
Right.
to trap the grabber, in the pit, and he beats him with the receiver and he chokes him with that record. Like he uses all the things that the other kids died by to overcome him. And that, I mean, that is straight up, video game logic right there.
Oh yeah, no, I mean he Home Alone's his ass right
Totally.
there.
Yeah.
I mean
Yeah.
it's and you buy every minute of it. Like that's another hidden brilliance with this film. You believe that Finney can take this guy down.
hmm
It's not some okay, so last minute third act, a third act, ex machina, somebody comes in and saves the day, or
hmm
it's Gwen and the cops there to stop him. Like it's Finney taking him down, and it's in a lot of ways it's a fair fight because Finney has been preparing for this moment, and it's not like oh he got lucky or the grabber just fell on the axe. Like everything works out because Finney has been prepared.
Well, he figures out what to do, right?
Yeah.
And he figures out like I'm going to throw a steak to the dog, so the
Right.
dog's distracted. That's why I'm going to get away. But what's wild is when he realizes that he comes out of the house and the cops are across the street.
Yeah.
So again, the visions are close; they're not perfect, and that's when they realize like, oh, we're at the wrong house,
Right.
and then they go figure it out. They're like, oh, and the horrors are all revealed and everything at that point. But I love the way that this thing resolves because most movies like this would just end with him coming out of the house and the
Yeah.
cops are there and lights and credits. And I love that we get a bit of a reconciliation. The dad
Yeah.
realizes what he almost lost with the kids and what how his life kind of was falling apart and all this stuff like that and reconciling with his kids and you wonder like okay how long does that last you hope it does, right? But that's a moment of hope most movies wouldn't bother to give. And then Finney going back to school and
I
he's
was going to say, yeah.
yeah
Call
he's
me Finn.
yeah he's a hero. He's sitting next to the girl he likes and all this. I'm like I dug that. I really thought that was cool.
Well, this is where I really feel this movie goes in that direction that and again, I'm not trying to oversell it, everybody, but
Mhm.
in the same way of, you think of films like Halloween, for example, or The Shining, like we mentioned, like there's just that extra bit that goes to making this something special.
Yeah.
It's not just a horror movie. There's
Yeah.
something more to it. There's a a real human emotional level at the core of it, which I think one makes us identify and root for the characters, but also it just makes it more than just, okay, yeah, it's a scary movie, but it's also got a real good story.
Well, and it's what Andy Machete got when they made it chapter one or the first it. And at
Yeah.
the time they thought that was all they were going to have. And for my money, they could have just stopped with
Yeah,
that
yeah,
because,
that's a whole other, yeah, we could do a
yeah,
whole
but,
episode on that one.
he figured out that the core of this is the kid's story. The adults were never the interesting part in the book. They're not the interesting part in either of the movie pieces of it, even though some of their stuff is fun.
It's the kids.
The kids and the way that they resolve together,
Yeah.
to overcome the worst thing that could have ever happened to any of them and resolve together to stick it out. We'll come back if we have to. That whole blood pact and all that stuff. The way he finished that movie up was the perfect way to end that story. At that point. And this is the same kind of thing. It's those in that same vein. It's like that. Yeah, that's how you finish this story.
Right.
Is we want to see our hero not only triumph, we want to see him the next day,
Right.
the week after. How's he doing? And what you see is like, yeah, he's going to be okay. And that's what makes you feel good about it. It's what makes me so intrigued about where in the hell are they going to go in a part two? I've seen one trailer and I said, okay, I don't want to know anymore. I just want to go as cold as I can into this because I'm intrigued because I don't know how you pick up from that. Sinister, I knew how you picked up from. This, I don't know.
When this was first announced, that's a perfect segue. I was under the impression that it was going to be more of a prequel slash sequel. And of course, turned out to be nonsense. But at the time, I'm like, oh, I don't need to know the origin of the grabber. That's a
Yeah.
story that we don't need to go down that path. And I'm like, okay, you're going to try to make it a sequel, but what I have seen from the few trailers, again, we're not going to put the cart before the horse here, but there's something special going on in these trailers, and it really seems like it's in many ways, a sharp turn, maybe a sharp right turn for a sequel where it's really going to take the elements of the first film, but completely, part of the expression, fuck it up in a good
Well,
possible way. Now, I mean,
mhm.
maybe in the bad way, I don't know, but hope
I
springs
mean,
eternal.
we're bringing everybody back, but we're going to go to a snow camp.
Yeah,
So I'm already intrigued in the setting, and I just the tagline, like "dead is just a word." I'm like,
yeah.
ooh, okay. So my projection on it, again, I know nothing, so I'm just telling you what I'm reading here. I'm like, oh, so when you think you kill the evil guy, well, remember you're working in a world where ghosts exist. So what
Right.
if he gets to be one now?
Yep.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like it's like the end of the ring. Like you did what?
Yeah.
You know, when that's some great kid acting, by the way. It's like
Yeah, that's right.
you let her free? Oh no, that's not what you're supposed to do. And then you see what happens as a result of that. But that's a fun one to revisit sometime. I don't know about its sequels or anything, but the Ring, the original,
The original, yeah.
Ringu's incredible too, by the way, the Japanese version. But the Ring is an incredible adaptation of that, and that's just a great end too. So I'm like, oh, are they gonna ring this? Because then I'm real intrigued. Because two American dudes doing J horror, okay, I'm game.
No, there's definitely something going on. There's definitely a reading between the lines here. I don't think this is a conventional sequel. I think
Mm-mm.
we're going to get something really interesting, and it will. If it all comes together, I really do think it will cement, at least in my mind, and maybe the larger audience's mind, the Grabber as arguably one of the better horror monsters, slasher, killers, what have you, to come out in a long time. I mean, it really has. It boggles the mind. I mean, I know some people might say, Art the Clown from the Terrifier movies, but when you sort of think like in the mainstream,
Yeah, those movies live in a different space.
it
though.
is.
Like they
Yeah.
had success, but they also live in they have a different
I
MO,
don't
you
think
know?
you're ready to say that Art the Clown is on the same level as Michael or somebody like that.
Well, Anthony Alfredo to the podcast
I
would,
know.
but
No.
shout out to Anthony. But no, but I mean, no, I get what you're saying. Like that movie lives in the slasher
Right.
world, and very much like the extreme horror world, but also with a lot of comedy in it.
Yeah.
There's a good. This is much more in the psychic realism, if
Yeah.
that makes sense. Like
Yep.
we're gonna have a little bit of mysticism, we're gonna have a little bit of the ooga booga, but we're mostly gonna be about the resilience of people.
Yeah.
And that again, I attribute a lot of that to the writers and to the one thing I did read is that Joe Hill pitched them this crazy idea. He's like, well, if you wanted to do a sequel, you could do this, and that's what they based this off of. Was just sort of well, you could do this. And,
Oh, that's fascinating.
but I mean, I think his only credit is characters by,
Sure.
but he gave them a runway of like, well, you could do this if you ever wanted to. And then of course the thing, we didn't talk about it, but they made it for about $16 million, and in typical Blumhouse fashion, they 100 times that.
Oh, yeah.
So, cause that's what, the best of the Blumhouse, runs do.
When Blumhouse is cooking, and this is a case of they were cooking, they really do deliver something good and tasty.
And look, and when you've got a producer like Jason Blum who has a repertoire of actors he can go to, Ethan Hawke being a number one, and he's got people like Derrickson and Cargill in the wings to go, hey fellas, I can make this next thing happen for you. It's neat to see, and I'm a big fan of I grew up with a lot of music and stuff, and it was usually like two or three guys that were kind of the driving force of the stuff, and I'm always good with teams.
Yeah.
People that just create things. And I think that's fun in film too. We've talked about it here and there and stuff, but like, I don't know that Emma Thomas gets enough credit for what she brings to Christopher Nolan's, whole world and team. And he'll tell you like it's,
Oh, yeah.
She's as important as anybody else, and my brother, anybody, to this stuff. Or you see actors and directors that team up, like Spielberg's done it with Hanks several times, and Scorsese's done it with of course De Niro forever, and he's done it with DiCaprio a lot, and you see this. Michael Mann's done this with several people, and it's fun to watch people that just know how to work together and just get the best out of each other, and in this case, I feel like, okay, well, if they're going to do a sequel to something that didn't really have a sequel, and when I watched it, I'm game for it because of everyone involved. Like we brought the whole band back together to do their version of what they want to do next. So,
Well, again, what it feels like, and again, this is just based on the trailers and what we know, it really does feel like they're swinging for the fences. Where, the first film ends in a way where you don't need a sequel. It's a perfectly contained, scary story, and that's fine. But there's something about what they're doing here where it really does seem like, I mean, yes, I know everybody, there are the business considerations, and the first film was a huge success. So of course, it makes total sense to do a sequel. But all of that aside, it does feel like there is something creative going on underneath the surface that is not just a money grab, if you will. Like there's a real effort to tell a story.
yeah, Scott Weinberg on his great podcast Overhated did a good episode. I think it's in the Patreon, but did an episode with Cargill about Sinister
wow.
2. And if you want to just hear a guy really lay out for you how something came to be, he'll tell you that they weren't really interested in a sequel, but they tossed him a lot of dough and they started pitching ideas around, and then they got Doctor Strange and said, we don't have time for this anymore.
Right.
So, but we'll write it for you. And if you want to go and do with it, and as Cargill said it, he was like, well, we figured if they were going to do it, at least we could have a say in what the structure of it looked like.
Right.
And he defends it in a pretty interesting way. And I'm not opposed to the idea. I didn't totally go with it, but Sinister 2 is an example of that was a massive hit.
Right.
It was a huge hit at home. It was a huge hit in theaters. It's, it's been rated one of the scariest movies ever made, all those things. How can we not sequel that? Because there's tons of places to go. And I have fun with it the same way that I have fun with like Jaws 2.
Oh
or
yeah,
something
no,
like that.
it's not going to.
There's no way it could be the same thing.
No.
But this one's different because it's, we're going to let the guys that made the thing take the thing to the other side too, which is a different way of doing sequels. And that's when you get into at least for me, you get into a much more interesting space.
Yeah, because you don't know what's going to happen. In a lot of ways, that is sort of like the original film where the trailers to me always said one message. And then when you actually see the thing, it's there, but it's something much deeper. It's something much more sinister, if you will. And I mean that with all the positivity in the world. And I love it when a movie can subvert your expectations and become something more than what even it may have even been originally intended to, regardless of your own feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Like if it can go in a different place and give me something new to enjoy about it, I'm game for this. I'm intrigued by it enough to want to go down the path again. Because I watched the Black Phone when it came out and thought, man, that was really cool. It's kind of a return to form for these guys. Cool. I'm digging it. Let's see what's there. Having no thought that they would ever do another one. And I liked it a lot, but it wasn't a movie that I thought, well, I want to rewatch that a lot. I felt like I really just, got a lot from it. And what I'm so thankful for is to have the opportunity to go back and do it with you. And we've had enough runway that, like, say, I've got a chance to watch it a couple of times and really get into it and go like, man, this is a whole lot better than a lot of stuff that I've revisited, and it needs to be on my rotation more often.
Oh no, I mean this one, for the last 3 years, it has been at least once a year during spooky season that I revisit this film, and I mean I think it's one of the better horror movies made, certainly this decade, and I would put it into one of the better horror films made this century. It really is more than just what the premise would suggest, which is, okay, kid gets kidnapped and put inside of a basement. How's he going to escape? Like it's a simple enough premise, but I think as we've seen throughout movie history, a lot of times those simple ideas can actually be something much more and have a longer staying power than just what their premise might suggest.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see if where this lands in like the part twos of horrordom. Like there's plenty of examples of like that was not the way to go. And then there's other ones, and particularly in like the psychological horror place that I think like, oh no, that was definitely the way to go. Like Silence of the Lambs may be the chief example of all time. People don't realize that was a sequel.
That's the second one.
Yeah, that's the second one. And in fairness, it's also the most interesting book out of the series too.
That's right.
So that helped. But it got in the right, not necessarily it was in the wrong hands the first time, but that was a Manhunter was made with a different set of sensibilities.
Yeah.
By the time Jonathan Demme got a hold of that thing and 1990 had hit and just, cinema changed,
It's a different world.
Yeah, and he gave that, and he struck gold with that cast, and I mean top to bottom with that cast, not just Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. Everybody in that movie is bringing the A game, and a lot of that goes again to the director and to the people that paired that book into that script, and that's another one where there's sections just lifted. Yeah, and then there's also parts where they're like, those 3 chapters can be 3 sentences, and that's all it needs to be, and that's smart. And I love adaptation like that, and so this one, I kind of think about that. I hold a very special affinity for Psycho 2. Because of the people who made it were people that were connected to that first one still and made it with love and care for that one. And they got raked for it at the time. But then when people actually watched it, and now of course have watched it for decades, they realize like, God, that was really good. It's messed up, but it's really good. Now it has a wild ending. The coda is the wild part of it, but just the movie itself and the way that the characters work, I don't know. it's one of those that like I didn't expect it. It subverted my expectations. It gave me something new. So if Black Phone 2 can live in that realm of things, and I know I'm putting a high mark on it there, but if it's aspiring to do that, I'm game for it. I think it'll be fun.
No, I mean the again, we'll see in a few weeks, but the trailers themselves suggest it's going to be a much bigger swing than even the first film.
And
So
and in that case,
that's
maybe it's
encouraging.
Hellraiser 2, which was a
Right.
huge swing.
No, I mean,
Yeah, but is it? That's a movie that you're like, man, if they'd have just had like $2 million more, like what they
right.
got out of this is
Oh, it
amazing.
was
But
pretty
it's
impressive.
it's
Yeah.
still amazing, And it was Clive going, there are no more of these, and then there've been 10 more.
I know.
But but well, they finally did a good one, and on Hulu. But yeah, that's an example of like really swinging for the fences and
Yeah.
doing something different, and I'm hopeful that it turns out to be as interesting and as attention getting as this one was without exploiting itself too much.
Right.
Yeah.
That would be my hope. Like I said, don't over explain a good villain. That is usually words of wisdom.
Yeah, well, and if you're going to take the good villain and you're going to give him an extra set of powers now because he's undead
Right.
or whatever, then
Whatever
okay,
he's doing. Yeah, exactly.
I'm game. How do you kill that?
Yeah.
And that's Jerry Lee lighting the piano fire and walking by Chuck Berry going, "Go get it, killer." I mean that I'm game. Yeah, let's see what you got.
No.
Because again, when you bring back the entire creative force,
Well, that's the thing.
in the same positions, then yeah, you should run it back. Yeah, let's see you run it back and see what's different about it.
No, it's going to be an interesting one. It remains one of my most anticipated films of the year. So fingers are crossed that it definitely lives up to expectations. But
Oh yeah.
certainly I will have thoughts. I'm sure in a few weeks' time. Jay, any final thoughts on the original film? Kind of now 3 years later.
Oh man, yeah. I got to say, like, the thing about this one that again, it just sticks in such a fun way is that if you just want to watch a good character study and watch neat kid actors, in a fun whodunit kind of movie where we already know who does it, but nobody else does, and they have to figure it out. Like you're into the Nancy Drew Hardy Boys thing, this movie's got you. If you want a modern horror icon being made in front of you, this movie's got you. And if you want something that can give you all the eeriness that Sinister had, but it's the way it plays with its otherworldliness and supernatural part is much more detective than it is Ouija board, then
Right.
then this movie can do that for you. And I find it again just a fascinating exercise in good filmmaking and in having a lot of fun with an audience, through time. So I'm a strong recommend on it for sure. And if we were in film strip parlance, this would be a good, strong, large popcorn. I gave it a 4 star on Letterboxd, and I stand by that because I think it earns every bit of that.
Oh no, I would co-sign what you have just said because I alluded to it a few years ago when I did a review after it came out, but now 3 years later and having all this time with the film and sort of having it be baked into the zeitgeist, I really do think it's one of the better horror films made in quite some time, and regardless of the iconography of the grabber, I just think it's a very compelling and frightening story. And at the end of the day, like that's what I want from any horror film. I don't care if there's subtext and backstory, like all that's wonderful. It's gravy. But if you're making a quote horror movie, you got to deliver on that part. And this is all of that tenfold. And it continues to age very well in my eyes. It's like a good bottle of wine. It doesn't go out of style, and there's always something new to be gleaned from it. And I think that's again a testament to Derrickson and Cargill, but also the performances. Everybody was on their A game for this movie, and I think it shows up now 3 years later. I mean, we're talking about it here tonight.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, I think that's the best part of it is that it's didn't just come and go.
Right.
You know, and not only because it's getting a sequel, but it's something that has just stayed in the pop culture, place. And horror is, people say horror is having a renaissance. Horror is never not being made, but it is having a moment again. And I'm always fun for that, and whatever, part of the genre it falls in. And I'm curious to see if this can help push out some other cool ideas that may be sitting on a shelf somewhere, and it's probably going to be Blumhouse. I mean, A24 sort of specializes in a different space in the horror stuff. And I'm fine for them to do that because most of it I enjoy and think works. But this one, I hope we get more of this kind of thing because I think there's a place for small budget, fun actors, people but you see them doing things maybe you didn't expect. That there's a place for that. I also kind of feel like Derrickson and Cargill owe Ethan Hawke one. He's got to be like the supreme good guy at least once, and not in a Catholic way. Like we've got to pay this guy back to be like the most nice dad ever or something. I don't know. He keeps getting shot and killed and stabbed and hit in the face with a phone and murdered by ghosts and all kinds of other things. So I feel like Ethan Hawke deserves to be the hero again. So,
justice for Ethan, right there.
Hashtag justice for Ethan.
Yeah, make him the good guy just once. Just once. We'll start that movement. There
like Dead Poets Society 2, where they're really dead.
I know. There we go.
That sounds like a good Kevin Smith gag. But which I don't know how Ethan Hawke's never wound up in a Kevin Smith movie. He runs in some of the same circles, but oh well.
I'll give him time.
I don't know.
We're manifesting it right here.
I don't think Kevin's really putting out that work anymore. I think he's kind of doing other stuff now.
Yeah, no, I think you're right about that. You're right about that. No, but yeah, no, Ethan Hawke is he is a remarkable talent to say.
Yeah, he really is. He really is, and that I'm excited to see that and hear that at some point. So yeah.
Yeah, we'll when it happens, I'll make sure to have you back on.
Please do.
We can talk about how we started it here.
Here on Phil at the Movies, we
made it happen.
That.
So
yes,
that's right.
Yes.
No, please send the residual checks to Phil and Jay.
Yes. Speaking of Kevin Smith, where's my movie check?
I know, right? Start that hashtag.
Exactly.
Hashtag pay Jay. Oh, good God! But.
Yeah.
No, ladies and gentlemen, that is the Black Phone for you. So I certainly will be covering my thoughts in a week's time when the new movie drops. I'm really looking forward to it, and again, hope it delivers something unexpected. So that's again always the hope with any movie, but particularly when a sequel is unexpected. So don't Joker 2 this for me. So but
one of these days we're gonna have that conversation, sir. Because there's a brilliant piece of anti-cinema there that you just got to come around on.
Yeah, we'll have. I'll get a few drinks into me, then we can talk about it.
Hey, I just asked Misty and Kendall. I can talk you into a lot of things. So. Give me enough runway. So.
Right. I'll probably be busy that night. No. Oh God, but no, Jay, thank you as always. It's always a blast talking movies with you, buddy. And this was a fun one, especially being at this time of year and celebrating spooky season and a film that we both enjoy. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you.
Oh, Phil, thank you. Pleasure's been all mine as always. This is always a blast and fun to talk movies with you anytime. So thank you again for having me, and looking forward to having you back on Film Strip sometime soon.
Absolutely. And Jay, please tell everybody where they can find you and follow you on social media and your podcast and stalk you in the best possible way.
Yeah, well, I have more given up the personal social media these days and stuff, but you can find the show. Yeah, you can find the show at Film Strip Pod on all the social media. That's where we post announcements about shows. We repost our friend shows, things like that. So do give us a follow. We're on X, Blue Sky, Instagram, Facebook. And so you can find Film Strip Pod out there. And then Film Strip Podcast is just throw that in your podcatcher. We're in all of them. We're 415 and more plus episodes at this point deep.
fantastic.
So yeah, we got a lot of fun stuff coming up. I teased a little bit of what we were doing for Shocktober. I've got a really fun, you were part of our ongoing James Bond series that we
Yes.
had this year. And with life and schedules and stuff, we were not able to get the entire gang back together for the big round table that I wanted to do. But I was able to get a kind of a substitute for that. And I'm bringing in a different friend to talk about a very fun James Bond movie that's coming up on an incredible anniversary this December. And so if you want to just go Google that, you'll see which movie I'm talking about. I'll tease that out. But a familiar guest voice came back, and we've recorded that already. So that'll be out early December to do a little Bond, and then get all the other fun stuff that we're planning for the back part of the year. And then we'll launch into January just like always.
That's right.
Before you know it, we'll be at 16, and this podcast will be driving and next April. So we'll see what happens with that. So I think we've come up with all kinds of drive puns to see what we do on that day. So who knows what we might get on that day.
Well, that's fantastic. Yeah, please keep me posted with all the puns, because that will certainly be right up my alley.
Indeed. But again, thank you for having me on, man.
No, like I said, anytime, the mic is always open. And that does it for me today, everybody. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. As always, go support your local theater, buy physical media. And yes, I will be back next week, where we will do this all over again for the love of movies.
Still at the movies makes every movie a treat.